Hi guys, Grace of Red Barn Studios here. Today I'm trying something I'm calling quads. This is about the third time I've tried it, and I kind of like where it's going. What I'm doing here is actually taking a pencil, and it's a Stabilo Marks All. I forget how you pronounce that. Anyway, it's a Stabilo pencil, and I'm taking that pencil and lightly scribbling lines on it. And here you can see the sped up process. I am holding it really lightly, not making marks that mean anything. Next thing I'm going to do is actually take a damp brush, not a wet brush, and I'm going to go over each of those lines and just kind of do what Stabilo pencils do, kind of make those marks stand out if you touch them with water or paint. So that's the next step. And then I am just outlining those lines again. One of the things that I love is this paper. This paper is an 11 by 14 Bristol vellum. It's the paper I recommend for my online course, Scrape Layer Paint Create to make an art journal. I love this smooth processed paper. I tend not to enjoy canvas or textured paper very much, but this is really cool. And now I'm going to give it a quick dry, and then I'm going to go over it with some clear gesso. I'm not a big fan of clear gesso because it leaves the grittiness, which is why I stepped away from the textured canvas, but I wanted to seal in those lines and be sure they stayed so that the next layers, actually I can see those lines and paint in some shapes. So lots and lots of brush strokes now. I did use the scraper before, but because the scraper was actually scraping the texture over it, I wasn't getting a full coverage. So now the next step is to come in with some paint color. I chose a few different colors. They're mainly cool with the warm one I'm going to do first. That's the deep magenta. This one is by Artist Loft. I find because I'm not doing a whole lot of mixed media that I'm buying I'm not buying Goldens or Liquitex as much, although I do still have some in stock. And I don't want to buy more expensive paints and waste them, because most of this right now is just playing, just making pieces, keeping my creative juices going. Sometimes you'll see me actually painting with my left and my right hand. If I can't get in a space properly with one hand, I'll just kind of switch to the other, and that's okay. But I'm finding that this paint is actually a bit too bright, so I'm toning it down with some Liquitex titanium white heavy bodied paint, just so I can keep the color but not have it so vibrant, although you know I love vibrancy. And this next part is just adding that color in, making sure each quadrant actually has some of each color in it. And there you see me brushing off some of that excess paint in another journal, because you don't want to waste anything. And the next color coming in is actually Cerulean Blue Hue by Dale Rowney. I actually love this color blue, and loved it so much that I actually decided to mix it with some of the deep magenta to get this beautiful purple hue. Not a fan of purple, but I love when these two combine into one. One of the things that I'm trying to do with this piece is, even though I'm working across the whole thing, I'm remembering not to think each one as quadrants. I am trying to definitely make sure that each color gets in each quadrant, so that when I cut this up on the lines, the colors will be in each and every piece, and you'll see at the end how each one is cut up. So I'm adding a big old swatch of this color over there in that corner. I have no clue why, but it is what it is, and so I'm just going to go with it. In between, I want to definitely dry it and make sure the colors don't run a bit too much into each other. I really want the distinct colors in the distinct shapes to be seen. So at this point, I'm adding some more watered down clear gesso over the whole piece, just so I can keep these colors and keep working on top of what I already have. And I'm not using a brush this time. I'm actually using a plastic palette knife. I find that was the easiest thing after all to get it to spread and kind of keep the colors in. So a little bit of drying and feeling how cold it is. That's how I know I can go on sometimes. If certain areas feel damp or cold to the touch, you know it's not ready. It's not dry yet. So on to the next color, which is actually Golden's High Flow Acrylic Teal mixed with the Liquitex Heavy Bodied Titanium White. Don't ask me why, but they just seem to come together on the palette for me, and it works. I have a lot of white area there that I wanted to keep, but I didn't necessarily want to keep it completely white. And more of spreading this color around. I am going over some of these lines, kind of making my own shapes in there. It wasn't a hard and fast rule to keep all those shapes, but I needed to add more big bits of little color. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm taking now the Stabilo Alls pencil and putting in more shapes because that big old white is just bothering me. And I didn't want to have a large shape of, or a large swath of color. Instead, I want little bits of color all over. So now I've used the this gray, but oh my goodness, it just didn't fit in. So you'll see me take it out right now with a baby wipe, and that's okay. Some things work and some things don't. Going over those lines again with damp pencil, Stabilo, damp brush rather, and highlighting those lines once again. And going over each one of those, I can see different shapes that I like, and I would like to put different colors in, but I'm going with the process. I'm just going with the process right now. And so then you'll see me just keep working those shapes, really. In between, I took out that bit, but I actually dried the sheet a little bit just so that I can go over them with the white, because I didn't want the white to take up the color that was underneath. So I dried it and put a little bit of clear gesso before I went to this part and added some white in there. And I just wasn't happy with the gray that showed up on that left bottom part there. So I've decided to dry it a bit and see if I can get more white instead of gray by adding a bit of gesso over it. Just regular old gesso. My friend, my best friend in the studio. And giving it some time to dry, obviously, painting it in, drying it, and then bringing in those marks once again with the Stabilo pencil, drying and making sure it stays, and then going over it once again like I did before with the damp paintbrush so that those lines stay. Plus I got a new shape. I like the new shape that I got, and because it went across both two quadrants, that worked a bit better for me. And now I am just being sure that this gesso is dry before I go and add anything more. And I noticed that my lines had disappeared on the right side, so I'm putting those in again and making sure that the shape is definitely defined by my Stabilo. And I notice also at this point that I'm missing a color on one of the quadrants. So I go ahead and add the cerulean blue that I'd added before into that little pocket there on the lower left, yes. I am directionally challenged at most times, so forgive me. And to keep these layers, I just need to go over this with clear gesso once again. And this time I'm using a brush to brush it all on, all over the place. And I'm taking a bit of time to actually dry this because I wanted this layer to stay. Every time I dry, I am preserving the preceding layer. Taking a lot, you'll see I'm taking my hand and touching spaces where it feels cold. That means it's not completely dry. So I am just being thorough in my drying. This next part, I'm not sure why I did it, because I'm covering up all the white spaces. I guess I wanted to fill in those spaces without having to be so particular. So my brush has some pink magenta on it, but I just didn't like the way the pink was showing up over that blue. So I tried to take some of it, buff it back a bit, just to get some of that blue back in there. And at this point, I am kind of at a loss at what to do. I was going to call it an end, but it just didn't seem finished to me just yet. And the color I was going to add didn't particularly care for it at all, so I wiped that off. And I go to my trusty pen, my white pen. I love having white pen all over my work. The actual white pen I tend to use is a Papermate liquid paper correction pen. You know, once upon a time when you correct your writing and you'd use a liquid paper or just a paint pen, this is what I use in my work. So I am just adding doodles, dots, lines, circles, all sorts, just to kind of make some marks on the paper now. This part I know I'm coming to an end when I write with my white marker, because I usually like to leave that as one of the last things I do. Circles, large circles, small circles, dots, anything. I just love how it fills the paper up. So I continue making dots in many numbers, circles, because circles are my thing. And here you can see me counting the circles because I have this thing with odd numbers as well. And so I want to be sure that this white is dry so that when I go over it with the black, the Montana paint pen that I'm going to use and go over with, and to find out that there's no more paint in the Montana paint pen, so I head to my favorite gel roller for fabric pen and use that instead. Going over some of those same lines that I did with the white marker. I don't know why I like that. I absolutely love the black and white mixing together, which is so funny. The black and white mixing together in the same area. And then one of my first pencils that I fell in love with, the General's 9XXB. Love that pencil! And I go over my lines a bit more to sharpen the details. Kind of make those shapes stand out a little bit more across the 4 quadrants, making sure each one stands out. And as you can see, creating new lines so that they're not big old blobs of one color any one place. Here I am thinking about quads again instead of thinking about the whole piece as one big piece. I continue to add stabilo, and when I add stabilo, I actually have to go back in there with a damp brush and go over that line, and then I dry it, and then I add the 9XXB. It's all a process. I had thought at this point to actually go in with some journaling, but as these are abstracts, the journaling would just, to me, take away from the abstractivity. I don't think that's the word, but I'm using it. Would take away from the abstract nature, and bringing in some more white pen here just to make sure it stands out. So now for the reveal. As I said in the beginning, I actually used 1/2 inch artist tape because it doesn't stick to your paper and pull away your paper as much, or it did in some places, but that's okay. Because it's 1/2 inch tape, I actually put it around the edges so only 1/4 inch of the edges will show, and then when I cut the paper, it'll be left with 1/4 inch as well. Absolutely love how this turned out. Totally loved how it turned out. And you'll see the finished pieces in a few seconds.